The Rogue Theatre launched its inaugural season 19 years ago. Do you remember yourself in the fall of 2005? Do you remember the world? In fall 2005, Hurricane Katrina ravaged Louisiana. Saddam Hussein went on trial for crimes against humanity. YouTube was launched. My younger son Julian was turning 7. That year, a new celestial body in our own solar system, Eris, was discovered beyond Neptune, and poor Pluto could see the writing on the wall. My older boy, Anno, had turned 9. John Paul II, the Polish Pope Wojtyła, died in Rome. Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger became Pope Benedict XVI. Google Maps was launched. That year, USB flash drives replaced floppy disks. In 2005, the IRA ended its armed campaign, and the Chancellor-elect of Germany, Angela Merkel, became the first woman Chancellor of Germany. Dean and I were both very nearly almost turning 30. I kid. And Live 8, a series of benefit concerts to raise awareness for aid to Africa, took place in cities around the world. Since then, a generation of Tucsonans has come of age, and the Rogue has kept on trucking. Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth was originally titled The End of the World. The play premiered in 1942 and depicted a representative universal family named Anthropos, from the Greek word anthropo, meaning human. And they're confronting, over the course of 3 acts, 3 looming catastrophes: an epic ice age, an epic flood, and a post-war rebuilding of society. At the time, the actual world was in the very midst of the Second World War, but Wilder sets his 3rd act after such a cataclysm. Why then might Thornton Wilder have initially titled his play The End of the World? There is a line early in the play: "In the midst of life, we are in the midst of death," which surely applies to each of the conditions portrayed: the Ice Age, the Flood, the World War. And in what other ways might the end of the world apply to the skin of our teeth? Well, maybe I've just provided the Rogue with the opening question for its 1321st talkback in September. In any case, since I know many of you choose not to answer the opening question, ignore it at your will in favor of your own comments and questions, we'll leave the end of the world for further discussions. Thornton Wilder has been on the Rogue stage before. In 2006, the Rogue produced an adaptation by Cindy Meyer of Wilder's novel The Bridge of San Luis Rey. In 2010, under the direction of Joe McGrath, the Rogue produced Wilder's Our Town. The progression of these productions mirrored the sequence of their having been composed. The Bridge of San Luis Rey won the Pulitzer Prize in Fiction in 1927. Our Town won the Pulitzer in Theater in 1936. And The Skin of Our Teeth, the Pulitzer in 1942. Only 2 other American writers have won as many as 3 Pulitzers: Edward Albee and Eugene O'Neill, who won actually 4. But no other American author besides Wilder has won Pulitzers in more than one category. In his case, fiction and theater. The Bridge of San Luis Rey, you may recall, questioned the mysteries surrounding the lives and deaths of 5 individuals who happened to be crossing the bridge in San Luis Rey, Chile, when it collapsed. Our Town chronicled the daily travails and quotidian triumphs found on any given day in rural America. In my view, The Skin of Our Teeth provides a middle ground, if not a fusion, of the existential worldview inherent in The Bridge of San Luis Rey and the homegrown essentialism of Our Town. This is possible in part because the play's decidedly absurdist style, and also because Wilder had the kind of brilliant intellect Winston Churchill referred to when he wrote that the ability to uphold opposing views in a single mind is the hallmark of a greater intelligence. Thornton Wilder had that kind of intelligence. In its January 12, 1953 cover story, Time magazine cited Wilder's interplanetary mind. In the words of his nephew, Tappan Wilder, writing in his postscript to the 50th anniversary edition of the play, he said his father had the propensity to write from a vision that was at once American and universal. In her introduction to a new printing of the play, playwright Paula Vogel, herself a Pulitzer recipient, spoke of Wilder's influence on her generation of writers. For an American dramatist, she claimed, all roads lead back to Thornton Wilder. And in addition to being a playwright and a novelist, Wilder was an accomplished essayist, scholar, teacher, lecturer, and translator. He spoke 4 languages, as well as an accomplished screenwriter. As for Wilder's eventual title, The Skin of Our Teeth, some of you may know what my friendly ChatGPT artificial intelligence account recently informed me. This expression we commonly use derives from the book of Job in the Old Testament, chapter 19, verse 20, when Job says, "My bone clings to my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth." The following road production is John Capecci's adaptation of Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. Regarding Calvino's novel, published in 1979, I must make mention of another seminal Calvino work, 6 Memos for the Next Millennium, released a handful of years later. These 6 memos are actually 5 in number. They are titled Lightness, Quickness, Exactitude, Visibility, and Multiplicity. These are the qualities of Western literature that Calvino traced back 1,000 years, and, writing in 1985, the qualities he hoped would endure in this millennium. Calvino had intended to write the 6th essay, to be titled Consistency, while in the U.S. delivering the lectures at Harvard. Sadly, Italo Calvino died of an aneurysm on the eve of that departure. Perhaps even more now than at the turn of the millennium, we grapple with Calvino's many worldly and otherworldly concerns. The weight of words, the speed of imagery, the need for precision of meaning, the visual component of communication, and the extrapolative nature of literature. About lightness, quickness, exactitude, visibility, and multiplicity, Calvino wrote, "In an age when other fantastically speedy, widespread media are triumphing and running the risk of flattening all communication onto a single homogeneous surface, the function of literature is communication between things that are different, simply because they are different, not blunting, but sharpening the differences between them, following the true bent of written language." In his chapter on multiplicity, Calvino wrote about a timeless source of artistic anxiety, and that is the inability to find an ending. In relation to the form of the novel, Calvino had always felt that the more he progressed in writing one, the more he felt that the limitless possibilities of any beginning became constrained by the demands placed on readers and authors about their respective expectations. In graduate school, I was taught that endings in fiction ought to feel both unpredictable and inevitable. But typically, the more one proceeds in writing a novel, or a play, or an essay, or a poem, the more one feels the weight at arriving of an ending that strikes the readers as just that, unpredictable and inevitable. And perhaps this is why Lillian Hellman, in her memoir Pentimento, said that all playwrights lose their nerve when writing third acts. Calvino overcame this challenge ingeniously when writing If on a Winter's Night. It's a book comprised of 10 different beginnings of 10 different novels, framed and laced together by none other than you and me, and the author himself, and the help of another companion, Ludmilla, as we attempt to make sense of the intrigue that ensues in the even-numbered chapters. It's fabulous. Throughout, the second-person you, the reader, shares the plight of the author Calvino in the inability to find an ending. The odd-numbered chapters, 1, 3, 5, and so on, function as a framing for the whole. And I have always been struck by Calvino's definition of this structural device. Both in art and in literature, the function of the frame is fundamental. It is the frame that marks the boundary between the picture and what is outside. It allows the picture to exist, isolating it from the rest, but at the same time it recalls and somehow stands for everything that remains outside the picture. I might venture a definition, he says. We consider poetic a production in which each individual experience acquires prominence through its detachment from the general continuum, while it retains a kind of glint of that unlimited vastness. Here, then, is the beginning of Italo Calvino's Chapter 1. You are about to read Italo Calvino's new novel, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. Stai per cominciare a leggere il nuovo romanzo di Italo Calvino, Se una notte d'inverno un viaggiatore. Relax, concentrate, let the world around you fade into the distance. Rilassiti, raccogliti, allontana da te ogni altro pensiero, lascia che il mondo che ti circonda sfumi nell'indistinto. You had better close the door. The television is always on in the other room. La porta è meglio chiuderla. Di là c'è sempre la televisione accesa. Tell everyone, I don't want to be disturbed. I'm about to read the new novel by Italo Calvino. Dillo subito agli altri, sto leggendo. Non voglio essere disturbato. Sto cominciando a leggere il nuovo romanzo di Italo Calvino. Or, if you prefer, say nothing. Just hope they leave you in peace. O, se non vuoi, non dirlo. Speriamo che ti lascino in pace. I remember the first time I read that opening. It was so alluring, so enduring, so directly spoken to me and to everyone. Then came the even-numbered chapters revealing the beginnings of 10 different novels in 10 different styles, different genres. You get spy stories, love stories, gothic romance, whodunit stories, interlaced by the sometimes bemusing, often vexing, consistently confusing odd-numbered chapters when you, the reader, along with the author Calvino and the hapless Ludmila, try making sense of it all. The book shook the literary world and has been translated into more than 30 languages. It is among the most pleasurable reading experiences I have ever had. Somehow the rogue obtained the rights to the Calvino novel from the estate, and in November will be treated to their and John Capecci's theatrical rendition. Here, I'll try boosting Rogue Theater ticket sales by telling you that the very next play in its upcoming season was in its day considered vulgar, vile, beastly, unnatural, so calculated to calumniate, degrade, and defame a people and all they hold sacred, an abomination. This was one of the gentler reviews. It was printed in a respectable publication, the Irish Theatre. And another viewer wrote, "The blood boils with indignation as one recalls the incidents, expressions, ideas of this squalid, offensive production." There was also, "No adequate idea can be given of the barbarous jargon, the elaborate and incessant cursing of these repulsive creatures." Now be honest. You know you want to see this play. The Playboy of the Western world tells the story of one Christopher Mahone, who arrives in the village on Mayo Island, Western Island, claiming he has killed his father. Immediately, he becomes the local hero. And more. The women of the town, a spouse, a widow, several maidens, they swoon upon him. Different as they are, they share a thermal, feral, primal quality in their lusting for him. Don't you want to see this play? The Playboy of the Western world premiered in Dublin in 1907. It occurs in 3 acts. On opening night, rioting broke out well before the middle of the play. Here is an account of that performance in the periodical Freeman's Journal. Catcalls, strident bugle notes, and fierce demonstrations added to the general din. For fully 5 minutes, not a word spoken on the stage could be understood. The second act was all an uproar, and concluded among a hurricane. The interval between the acts was occupied by a fistfight in the vestibule. The third act was unintelligible, played amid bugle calls, hisses, applause, and boos. After the performance, the house had to be cleared by the police, and demonstrators marched under police surveillance through Abbey Street. Don't you want to see this play? In subsequent performances of that first production, it was reported that 200 police were stationed inside and outside the theater. One reporter noted that the police were thick as blackberries in September. They lined the aisles from which were heard taunts of Sinn Fein, and kill the author. Things did not get better when the play came to America, maybe because it premiered in that cradle of our democracy, Boston. Irish Boston. On a more positive note, there is something called the Irish Literary Renaissance. In 1897, William Butler Yeats, dramatist Isabella Augusta, known as Lady Gregory, and political activist Edward Martin published the Manifesto for Irish Literary Theatre, in which they claimed that their intention was to establish a national theatre for Ireland. 2 years later, in 1899, with additional backing by novelist and poet George Moore, they founded the Irish Literary Theatre, dedicated to producing works in Dublin by Irish authors. John Millington Synge was its rising star. He had previously written Riders of the Sea, which today you can find in most world anthologies of theatre. It was Lady Gregory who saw in Synge a writer to elevate the Irish spirit of the times, and it was Yeats who encouraged Synge to travel to the Aran Islands west of Galway Bay off the west coast of Ireland for the inspiration of what became the Playboy of the Western world. Synge kept a diary of his stay in what he called this extreme part of Ireland. I am settled at last on Inishmaan in a small cottage with a continual drone of Gaelic coming from the kitchen that opens to my room. This journal was published in 1907, the year that the Playboy of the Western world was first produced. He continues, "The kitchen itself is full of beauty and distinction. The red dresses of the women who cluster around the fire on their stools give a glow of almost Eastern richness, and the walls have been toned by the turf smoke to a soft brown that blends with the gray earth color of the floor. Every article on these islands has an almost personal character, which gives this simple life, where all art is unknown, something of the artistic beauty of medieval life." He goes on to note, "A few of the men have a curiously full vocabulary. Others know only the commonest words in English, and are driven to ingenious devices to express their meaning." According to American scholar Lee Jacobus, editor of the Bedford Introduction to Drama, Synge said he learned how people speak on the islands in part from overhearing the servant girls, such as those described in his journal, talking among themselves in the kitchen beneath his room. His musical training enabled him to catch intonations of English as it was spoken by the native Gaelic speakers. Elsewhere, Synge himself wrote that he credited Irish writers with the advantage of being able to listen for a few more years to a language that is rich as a nut. In cracking this nut, Cindy, the director, and Joe, the speech coach, will have their hands, as usual, more than full. Let's hope for packed houses. And can't you just see them during the melees directing everyone to the two exits, which are located directly under the two exit signs? Just when you thought you knew where things were headed. The human brain has approximately 100 billion neurons. Currently, the largest of the large language models used to power artificial intelligence has 100 billion variables, which can be trained to infer new content. 100 billion neurons, 100 billion variables. Does that make us even for now? Earlier, we recalled impressions of ourselves from 19 years ago. Flash forward now 4 decades. In Jordan Harrison's new play, Margerie Prime, the year is 2063. Margerie is 85 years old and ailing with dementia. Her husband, Walter, who is deceased, still lives with her in the form of her Prime, an artificially intelligent being. He is in his early 30s. Imagine that. This play posits provocative questions. Can our memories be strengthened with the help of artificial intelligence? Might AI eventually understand us better than we understand ourselves? And will we be any less human if it does? James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Margerie Prime faces our future with AI head-on. Whether it inspires, induces, or foreshadows change in us, I hope, is up to us. The playwright Harrison has said, "Computers will just keep getting better. The only thing we can do is get better at being human ourselves." Margerie Prime had its world premiere at the Mark Taper Forum in 2014. Since then, the play has succeeded nationally. In the New York Times, Ben Brantley wrote, "Margerie Prime is an elegant, thoughtful, and quietly unsettling drama. It operates by stealth. At some point, you realize it's been landing skillfully targeted punch after punch, right where it hurts. It keeps developing in your head like a photographic negative, long after you've seen it." Another reviewer noted, "This is a play that requires an intimacy with its staging, a proximity to its audience, especially as it deals with the inner working of the characters' inner lives. As intimacy is a hallmark of the Rogue, I am curious to see how it will all play out." No discussion of any Rogue season would be complete without at least one, and preferably 3 references to Dante's Divine Comedy. I asked my friendly ChatGPT communicant a question I knew the answer to. Can you tell me where Shakespeare's story of Romeo and Juliet comes from? Certainly. Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet is based on a narrative poem by Arthur Brooke titled The Tragical History of Romeus and Juliet, published in 1562. No, I mean Shakespeare's immediate source. I mean the historical origin of the story itself. The Montague-Capulet feud, as portrayed in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, is a fictional construct. There is no historical evidence to suggest that such a feud existed in real-life Verona. I was having fun now. "Dear ChatGPT," I typed in, "surely Arthur Brooke didn't make up the story himself. What more can you tell me about his source material?" In Arthur Brooke's poem, The Tragical History of Romeo and Juliet, the families are named Montague and Capulet, much like in Shakespeare's play. However, Brooke's narrative differs in various aspects from Shakespeare's rendition. For example, the characters are not as fully developed, and there are fewer subplots and intricacies in the relationships. I was about to redirect the thing again, but ChatGPT kept right on typing 3 more perfectly punctuated sentences, concluding, "Shakespeare's portrayal of family rivalry resonates with broader themes of conflict, power struggles, and the consequences of entrenched hatred. The feud serves as a dramatic device to heighten the tension and drive the narrative forwards rather than being rooted in historical fact. In summary, while the Montague-Capulet feud is a fictional creation, it reflects a broader historical and cultural dynamics of Renaissance Italy, providing a rich backdrop for Shakespeare's exploration of love, fate, and societal conflict." No! As we all know, as everyone should know, as especially Christopher Johnson should know, in the 6th canto of Dante's Purgatory, we find Virgil and Dante traversing among the late repentants and those who died by violence. Virgil says to Dante, "Vieni a vedere Montecchi e Capelletti, Monaldi e Filippeschi, uom senza cura, color già tristi e questi con sospetti." Come see the Montagues and Capulets, the Monaldi and the Filippeschi, those ruined, those with eternal regrets. Dante wrote the Divine Comedy in 1300. These four families were Ghibellines, arch-enemies of the Guelphs. They lived, respectively, in Verona and Cremona. Those already ruined refers to the Montagues and Capulets who capitulated their family dynasties at the time of Dante's writing. They were not late repentants, but they were among those who died by violence. And so, AI's large language model with 100 billion variables in its memory hasn't even read Dante. What good is it? Here is Romeo in Shakespeare's play, catching sight of Juliet at the ball. Oh, she doth teaches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night. And Juliet in Act 3, give me my Romeo, and when he shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night. Yes, Shakespeare derived much of his play's star-crossed imagery from Arthur Brooke, which he sublimated and perfected. In Carolyn Spurgeon's seminal study, Shakespeare's Imagery and What It Tells Us, we are treated to countless instances of Shakespeare molding metaphors to reveal the very cores of our existence. Spurgeon's book was given to me by Patricia McKnight, whom some of you may know. Patricia is a lifelong theatergoer and longtime fan, to put it mildly, of the Rogue. For many years, she would attend multiple performances of each Rogue show and write personalized reviews of the plays, which she would then send to friends. I was fortunate to be one of them on the receiving end of those letters. And it gives me great special pleasure to cite a passage from the book, Shakespeare's Imagery, that speaks so profoundly to Shakespeare's genius. Spurgeon writes, "For I am inclined to believe that analogy, likeness between dissimilar things, which is the fact underlying the possibility and reality of a metaphor, holds within itself the very secrets of the universe." In his mastery of metaphor, Shakespeare reveals to us the very secrets of the universe. It doesn't matter whether he knew that the earth circled about the sun, or whether base metals could be turned into gold, or if there is indeed music performed throughout the celestial spheres. These are things that science never fully reveals and that poets have intimated throughout history. Secrets of the universe. Romeo and Juliet, as characters, live and breathe on a stage in relation to each other, shaped by Shakespeare as sublime examples of our place in the world, and they speak to us largely through metaphor. The brightness of her cheek should shame those stars. As daylight doth a lamp, her eyes in heaven would walk through the airy region stream so bright, that birds would sing and think it were not night. Patricia McKnight's gift to me, her gifts to us, remind me that for 2 decades now, the Rogue Theater, in this physical space, reconstructed 20 years ago as a place to herald our many futures, this finite structure, this wooden O, as Shakespeare would have it, this frame, as Calvino would say, has brought us poetic productions of world classics which in their specificity of locale are rooted in our community. To quote Calvino, in their detachment from the general continuum, they have helped us retain a glint of our unlimited vastness. To end this talk, near its beginning, another passage from The Skin of Our Teeth. Early in the play, while addressing her spectators, Sabina, the maid character, says, "Now that you, the audience, are listening to this too, we understand the play a little better." This could serve as the perennial motto of the Rogue Theater. 88 plays and counting, we understand each of them, and ourselves, and our many worlds a little better together. We look forward to celebrating the Rogue Theater's 20th anniversary season. See you in September, perhaps at the opening of The Skin of Our Teeth, after which we hope you'll stay for the Rogue's 1321st post-show discussion. Thank you.